There's a piece of fruit in this story that lets you travel through time. It was eaten by a woman called Kazuki Toki, and it does exactly one thing. It sends you forward, never back. That's the whole design. A working time machine, in a world with talking hats and sky islands and a bloke made of rubber, and the one thing it cannot do is undo anything. I find that fascinating, and it's more or less why I wanted to make this. Because people talk about One Piece like it's a series with no rules. Like Oda just invents whatever the scene needs, and we all nod along. It isn't that at all. Nearly every impossible power in this world is impossible, in a very specific, very disciplined way, and the fences around them are the interesting part. So that's what this is, 15 knots, roughly the same size, sitting next to each other. No grand theory, no big reveal, nobody gets proven right about Immu. Drift off whenever you like. You won't miss anything, because there's nothing to miss. If you fancy more of these, the subscribe button's down there somewhere. Let's start with the specification, because the specification is the whole story here. The Toki Toki no Mi is a paramecia. It lets the user send themselves, or other people, forward in time. That's it. You pick a number of years, you vanish out of the present, and you reappear at the moment you chose, instantly, as if no time had passed at all. From your side, nothing happened. From everyone else's side, you are simply gone. It does not go backwards. Not a little bit. Not with effort. Not with some hidden awakening the story is saving for later. The trips are irreversible. Once you've jumped, the years you skipped are closed to you permanently. And here's the detail that always gets left out of the conversation, which is a shame because it's the most alarming bit. It doesn't move you through space, only through time. You arrive at exactly the coordinates you left from, however many years later, and you have absolutely no idea what's standing on that spot now. A wall, a ship, the sea, if the coastline's shifted. Every jump is a leap of faith about geography, and Toki made a lot of them. So let's talk about her, because her life is genuinely one of the saddest things in a series with quite a lot of competition. Kazuki Toki was born around 830 years before the present day of the story, which puts her right in the middle of the Void Century. She ate the fruit at some point in that period, and then she started running. Not from one specific enemy, from everything. Whenever she was cornered, whenever something bad was closing in, she'd jump forward to a time when whatever was chasing her had been dead for decades. And she kept doing it, over and over. She kept going until she ran out of century. And she arrived in Wano about 30 years before the present, at the age of 26. Sit with that number for a second. 26. She crossed the entire Void Century and came out the far side of it, and she was 26 when she got there, because from her point of view, she'd only lived a handful of years. She'd stop somewhere, look around, decide it wasn't safe, and go again. Everyone she ever met, she outlived by simply refusing to be there when they died. I'd argue that's the loneliest superpower in fiction, and Oda drops it in as a piece of flashback furniture. It's mentioned almost in passing. There's no big scene about what it does to a person to have no era of her own. She just turns up on an island, meets a lunatic after pirates corner her, and gets on with it, which brings us to the moment I think about most. In chapter 964, Toki is cornered by pirates. She's about to do the thing she's always done. She's winding up to jump, because that's her reflex. That's her entire life. That's how she survived being a woman alone, with something valuable in her head. And Odin shows up and stops it. Not deliberately, he just wanders into the situation being Odin about it, and the fight ends, and she doesn't jump. And then she never uses it again. Not once, for 10 years. That's the first time in her entire life she had a reason to stay put. She'd been running so long that stopping was the unusual choice, and the thing that made her stop was a man who had absolutely no idea he'd done it. The last time she uses the fruit is the one everybody knows, Odin's been executed. Odin Castle is burning. Kaido's forces are on the grounds, and there is no version of that night where the Kozuki family walks out. So Toki takes her son, Momonosuke, and 4 of the Red Scabbards, and she sends them 20 years into the future. And here's the knot. The only way to save Wano was to remove Wano's defenders from Wano for 2 decades and let the country be occupied. She didn't win the battle. She didn't even fight it. She took the people who could have fought it and posted them into the future like a letter. And then she stayed behind and died with everyone else. 20 years of Orochi, 20 years of the poison factory and the starving villages and the flower capital being propped up on the misery of everywhere else. All of that happens because Toki chose it. She looked at a country that could be saved slowly or lost immediately, and she picked slowly, and slowly meant that everybody she was standing next to would be dead before it worked. She won by leaving. She won by abandoning every single person she was trying to protect. I don't think the story ever quite says this out loud, and I think that's deliberate. Because if you say it out loud, it sounds monstrous. And if you don't say it out loud, it just sounds like a mother saving her son. Then there's Momonosuke, who is an absolute nightmare of a character to think about at 1 a.m. He is 8 years old. He's also 28. Both of those are true, and neither of them is a technicality. He didn't sleep through the 20 years. He didn't age slowly or get frozen. From his side, the castle was on fire, and then he was on a beach, and no time had passed at all. Every second of those 2 decades happened to many of the people he loved, and none of it happened to him. His retainers came with him, which helps, but think about what that actually means for them. Kinemon walks around Wano trying to organise a rebellion among people who watch the country rot, and he wasn't there for it. He has the moral authority of a hero and the lived experience of someone who nipped out for 20 minutes. It's a bit like running into someone you haven't seen since school, except one of you has a mortgage and a bad back, and the other one is exactly as you left them, except the person who hasn't changed isn't lucky. They've just lost the same 20 years in a different way. They didn't get to keep them either. Now, why does any of this matter beyond being a neat bit of world design? Because the one-way rule is the entire reason Wano has any weight. Toki is standing in a burning castle, holding the only device in the world that touches time, and she's helpless. That's the situation. She has the thing. It's in her, it works, and it will not do what she needs it to do. She cannot go and get her husband. She cannot go and get the 10 years back. All she can do is post her son somewhere she'll never see, and then turn round and face the people with the torches. Every choice in that arc costs what it costs because of one sentence in the fruit's description. You can carry people forward. You cannot fetch back the ones you've already lost. The fire is permanent because the fruit says so, and Toki knew that when she was still in the room with it. So she wasn't limited by her power. She was cornered by it. Which is a different thing entirely, and I think it's why she stayed with me for years while most of Wano's cast has gone a bit fuzzy. And one last bit, which I'll say flatly because it doesn't need any dressing up. When Toki died, the fruit went back into circulation. That's the rule for these things, and I'll get into how that works properly a bit later on. But for now, just the fact. It regenerated somewhere in the world, in some ordinary looking piece of fruit, in a bowl or on a tree or in a crate on some ship. And that was 2 decades ago. Somebody might have eaten it. Somebody might be walking around right now, able to send people forward in time and have no idea what they've got. Because it doesn't do anything obvious. It doesn't make you strong. It doesn't turn you into fire. You'd bite into it and feel completely normal, and you'd have to actually want to escape something before you found out. Anyway, that's the first one. 5 billion berries. That's the number the world government put on a piece of fruit. Not a warship, not an island, not a person. A piece of fruit sitting in a jar somewhere, valued at more money than anyone in the series had ever been publicly worth. The Ope no Mi, and I want to walk through what it actually does before we get to the strange bit, because the strange bit only lands if you know how good the ordinary bit is. Law puts up a sphere. Inside that sphere, he has total authority over matter. He can cut a person in half, and neither piece bleeds. He can swap your arm for someone else's. He can take a heart out of a chest and hand it to you in a little box, still beating, and you carry on having a conversation. He can swap two people's personalities so completely that they wake up in the wrong life. He can operate on things that shouldn't have a surgical option, like a person's sense of who they are. It's a doctor's fruit. Every technique is named after a procedure. The whole design language is medical. And then there's the other thing it does. Doflamingo calls it the ultimate devil fruit. And the reason isn't the shambles or the personality swaps. It's a procedure called the perennial youth operation. The user performs it on another person, and that person stops aging. Forever. Time stops touching them. The cost is the user's life, not their stamina, not a chunk of their lifespan. Their life. You do it once and you die doing it, and you never find out whether it worked. Which gives us the first knock, and it's a clean one. It's a gift that can only be given by the one person who can never receive it. Whoever holds the fruit is the only human being alive who is definitionally excluded from its greatest power. You are sitting on the cure for aging, and you are the single person on the planet who cannot be prescribed it. And that's a doctor's fruit. That's the joke, if you want to call it a joke. The most complete medical authority in the world, a power that can cut cancer out of a body and stitch a man back together from parts. And it cannot do a thing about the mortality of the person holding the scalpel. It fixes everyone except the surgeon. Now, the reason all of this matters emotionally rather than just structurally is Rosinante, because Cora steals the fruit for Law. And the way people usually tell that story is that he gave a dying boy the cure, which is true. But look at what he was actually doing. Doflamingo wanted the fruit so that Law would perform the operation on him. That was the plan. Law was never meant to be an heir, he was meant to be a syringe. Doffy would live forever, and Law would be a corpse on the floor of a nice room somewhere, having been useful once. So Cora didn't just give Law a cure, he spent the last stretch of his life keeping Law away from the operation that would have killed him. The whole desperate run through the snow, the shouting, the trafficking, all of it is a man trying to make sure a child never has to be the one who lies down on that table. And I think that's worth noticing because the ugliest feature of this fruit is the thing that made a genuinely broken man behave decently for the only time in his life. The cost is what gave the gesture weight. If the operation had been free, Cora hands over a piece of fruit, and it's a nice afternoon. Because it isn't free, it's the best thing anyone in that arc ever does. Right. Now the strange bit, and this one is a proper linguistic rabbit hole. Japanese has two separate words that both get flattened into immortal in English. There's furu, which means you don't age, and there's fujimi, which means you can't be killed. Different concepts entirely. One is about time, the other is about damage. The perennial youth operation has always been furu, eternal youth. Dressrosa was clear about that. Then in the magazine printing of the chapter, where Blackbeard is going at law, Oda had Blackbeard ask about Furu Fujimi. Both. Eternal youth and deathlessness, together. Which is a fairly big deal because it would mean the operation makes you genuinely unkillable. And then, in the volume 107 collected edition, that got quietly corrected back. The Fujimi came out. Blackbeard just asks about eternal youth, which, as far as anyone's worked out from lining up the two printings, means the thing English fans have been calling the immortality operation for years grants no immortality whatsoever. It stops the clock and nothing else. You'd be 25 for 1,000 years and you could still be shot. I love that Oda went back and fixed it. Not because it changes a fight, but because it means he cares about the difference. He's not being loose with this. He's being precise about a distinction that most readers wouldn't clock in either language. And it does one useful thing for the theorists. So let's touch it briefly and move on. Ivankov floated the idea that Emu has had the operation done, which would explain a person from the Void Century still being at the desk. If that's right, then the being at the top of the world is not invulnerable, just very difficult to age. Somebody could still put an end to that in the ordinary way, with the ordinary tools, which is a very different situation from an unkillable god, and it's sitting there on the shelf, unresolved, and I'm content to leave it there. Because here's the last thing, and it's the one that makes this fruit feel less like a power and more like a curse with paperwork. Every single route to this thing goes through somebody dying. Doflamingo needed Law to die to get it. Cora died to stop that happening. The previous user, whoever they were, is dead, because that's how the fruit got to be available in the first place. If Emu really has had the surgery, then some doctor somewhere lay down and gave up their entire existence so that one person could stop having birthdays. And that doctor is not in any records. They don't have a name, they're not a character, they're just a bill that got paid. It's a power whose supply chain is grief. Nobody has ever obtained it happily. Nobody ever will. 5 billion berries, and the price tag is the least expensive part of it. I want you to picture a filing cabinet, not a dramatic one, a dull one, in a dull room, in the Holy Land, where somebody whose name we'll never know sat down with a pen a very long time ago and had to solve a problem. The problem was this. There's a devil fruit out there that turns a person into the sun god Nika, a liberator, a figure that slaves in every corner of the world have been telling stories about for longer than the world government has existed. And the government cannot get hold of it. They've tried. It keeps slipping away from them. So they did the only thing left. They wrote a different name in the book. The Gomu Gomu no Mi doesn't exist. It never did. There's a mythical Zoan called the Hito Hito no Mi, model Nika, and at some point somebody reclassified it as a harmless paramecia that makes you stretchy. And that lie went into every record and every catalogue and every encyclopedia in the world. And it held. Now here's the bit I think is genuinely brilliant, and I mean brilliant as a piece of writing, not as a plan. They didn't destroy it. They couldn't. So instead of hiding the fruit, they hid the point of the fruit. For 800 years, the safest place in the world to keep a god was in a filing cabinet, under R for rubber, marked not important. And it worked. It worked completely. It worked so well that the fruit circulated freely, out in the open, passing through markets and ships and crates and warehouses, and nobody grabbed it, because why would you? It's the naff one. It's the joke fruit. Every kid who reads about devil fruits learns that some of them make you fire, and some of them make you ice, and one of them, unfortunately, just makes you bendy. And then a 7-year-old in a fishing village in the middle of nowhere ate it off a table because he was hungry and it looked like food. Which brings us to the first knot, and it's a lovely one. The cover-up preserved the thing it was hiding. If the world government had left it alone, if the Nika fruit had stayed the Nika fruit in the books, somebody would have gone looking. Somebody always goes looking. There'd have been expeditions and cults and treasure hunts, and the thing would have been found and locked in a vault within a generation. Instead, the government personally guaranteed that no serious person would ever waste a minute chasing it, and then it wandered around the planet unmolested until it found the one child on Earth who would eat it without asking questions. They protected it, on purpose, by accident, the entire time. And I do think that's funny. I think it's one of the funniest things in the entire series, and almost nobody talks about it as comedy, because it arrives inside one of the most dramatic chapters Oda's ever drawn. Now the mechanism they mention, which is worth pinning down properly here, because it comes up again. The elders say, the fruit keeps getting away from them. And one of them, rather than treating that as superstition, points out that this isn't unusual. Zoan fruits have wills of their own, minds, they want things. So that's canon. A piece of fruit can have preferences, it can decline. And the world government spent the whole life of their institution losing a chase to a piece of fruit that simply did not fancy being caught. They did finally get it, mind you. 10 years before the story starts, they secured it. Actually had it, on a ship, guarded. And according to Who's Who heard it in prison, and is not exactly a neutral source, the CP9 agent on guard duty that day was Who's Who himself. And it was Shanks who nicked it. Which, if it's true, means the world government's record on this is generation after generation of failure, followed by one success that lasted until the office junior fancied a souvenir. Then the souvenir got left on a table in the East Blue and eaten by a child. Nobody in that chain knew what they were holding. That's the whole thing. The lie was so effective, it fooled the people carrying it out. Right, second knot, and this is the one I actually find interesting. Luffy called his power the wrong name for the entire series. 2 decades of his life, hundreds of fights, and every single time he shouted the name of a technique, he was shouting a lie some bureaucrat invented before his great-great-grandparents were born. And it worked perfectly. The rubber worked, Gear 2 worked, Gear 3 worked. The bell, the pistol, the bazooka, all of it. Not 1% of the power was diminished by the fact that he had the name wrong. He was operating the most feared object in the world under a false label, and it did everything he asked of it. So, what was the cover-up actually protecting them from? Not the power, clearly not. The power was loose and functioning and beating up warlords for years, while the government did nothing about it. They sent Kuma after him twice, and neither time was about the fruit. They were protecting themselves from the story. That's the thing. They weren't afraid of a man who stretches. They were afraid of people finding out that a liberator exists, that there's a name for him, that the shape of him is written down somewhere, that the thing slaves have been whispering about in the dark is a fact rather than a comfort. The danger was never the rubber. The danger was somebody looking at a bloke made of rubber and going, "Hang on, I know that silhouette." Which is why the reveal in that chapter is a conversation between 5 old men in a room rather than a fight. Nothing physical changes. Nothing about Luffy's body is different from what it was a chapter earlier. All that changes is that people now know what to call it, and that alone is enough to make 5 of the most powerful individuals alive lose their composure. A name is supposed to describe a thing. Here, the name was the weapon, and it was pointed at absolutely everybody except the one person actually holding the fruit, who was completely unbothered and mostly thinking about meat. Here's an image to start with. 2 men standing in a mirror world. Both of them are looking at the next 3 seconds. Both of them can see it perfectly, in detail, like a memory that hasn't happened yet. And both of them are about to make sure it doesn't happen. That's the Katakuri fight, and it's the cleanest logical knot Oda has ever put on a page, and it's dressed up as a boxing match, so nobody notices. Let's do the mechanics. Advanced observation. Heiki is not prophecy. It's not a vision of destiny handed down by anything. It's a preview. The user gets a short, precise mental picture of what is about to happen based on everything currently in motion. Where the feet are, where the weight is, what the intent is, all of it extrapolated forward a few seconds and rendered as an actual image rather than a hunch. It's rare. The known club is tiny. Katakuri, Shanks, and eventually Luffy. That's it. It can't be trained into you by drills. Rayleigh couldn't teach it. It has to come out of you under enough pressure that it has nowhere else to go. The vision is generated by the present. It's an extrapolation. It's the world going, given all of this, here's what happens next. So the moment you act on it, you've changed the inputs. the future you saw was contingent on you not having seen it. Every time you use the ability successfully, you falsify the thing it just showed you, which means the power is only accurate as long as you don't use it. Beige says this out loud actually, which I appreciate. He points out flatly that Katakuri can see the future, and they can still change it. That's not a fan theory, that's a character in the story stating the operating rules of the strongest defensive ability in the setting, and then everybody carries on as if it were normal. And there's a demonstration of it that lasts about 4 panels, and I think about it constantly. The wedding, Katakuri looks ahead and sees the assassination attempt. He sees the sniper miss, he sees Pudding break down in tears afterwards, so he takes the shot himself. He fires at Sanji, because if it's going to happen anyway, better it comes from someone who won't miss. And he doesn't kill Sanji, Sanji survives. What Katakuri actually achieves is blowing the entire plot open in front of the Germa contingent, in public, in front of everyone, when the original future had it fizzling out harmlessly with a missed shot and an emotional wobble. He caused the failure by trying to prevent it. He looked at a future where nothing much went wrong, decided to improve on it, and personally manufactured the worst version. The most gifted user of the ability in the story, and his single biggest use of it in that arc, makes his situation actively worse than doing nothing would have. Nobody in universe ever mentions this, it's just there. Then the fight itself, which is the interesting version of the same problem. When 2 people with this ability face each other, they're each generating a prediction that the other one is invalidating in real time. Katakuri sees where Luffy's going to be. Luffy sees Katakuri seeing it and goes somewhere else. Katakuri sees him going somewhere else and adjusts. Luffy sees the adjustment. You end up with a picture that can't settle. Neither man is looking at the future. They're looking at a very fast argument about the future, and it never resolves, because the moment either of them stops arguing, they lose. And I'd say this is why the fight works, and it isn't the reason people usually give. The usual reading is that it's a great fight because Luffy earns the power up, which, fine. But the actual thing that happens is that Luffy learning to see the future doesn't make him win. It just makes them even. Both men can see, so neither man can use it. The ability cancels itself out, and they're back to punching each other. And the punching is decided by will and stamina and Snake Man, none of which have anything to do with precognition at all. The strongest ability in the story becomes irrelevant the moment 2 people have it. That's a proper piece of design that Oda gave his character the ultimate cheat, and then immediately made the cheat worthless in the only fight where it mattered. Now a comparison, because I think this one's actually relatable. You know when you're about to have an awkward conversation with someone, and you've run it in your head, and you know exactly what they're going to say, and then you get in there and you say you'll come back slightly early, because you're clever and you've prepared, and now they don't say the thing. They say something completely different, because you've spooked them, and you're standing there holding a devastating reply to a sentence that no longer exists in this universe. That's Katakuri at the wedding. That's advanced observation haki. It's the tactical version of overthinking a text message. And there's one more thing, which I'll say once and not labour, between the fruit that can only carry you forward and a future sight that stops being true the second you look at it. Oda has now built 2 separate powers that touch time, and not one of them lets anybody fix anything. He'll build a 3rd one later, and that one won't let anyone fix anything either. There's a pattern forming, and it's not an accident. You cannot go back. You cannot rely on what's coming. All you get is now, and the vague and unreliable impression that now is about to become something slightly different, which, when you think about it, is roughly the deal the rest of us are on. It's dawn on Thriller Bark. The party's over. Everyone's asleep in the wreckage, in that specific way the straw hats sleep after a win, which is to say, collapsed in a heap in the middle of a graveyard with no dignity whatsoever. And there's one man standing up. He's in a pool of his own blood which has spread out around him further than you'd think a person contains. And he's been standing there for hours, and when Sanji finds him, he says nothing happened. That's the scene everyone remembers from that arc. Fair enough, it's the best thing in it. But the reason it works is a rule that gets explained 2 chapters earlier and then never gets talked about again, and it's one of the strangest bits of physics in this whole world. So, the Nikyu no Mi. When you first meet it, it reads like a slapstick power. Kuma's got paw pads on his hands, and he can repel things. He slaps a person, and they fly for 3 days. He slaps the air and it becomes a bomb. He slaps an attack and it goes back where it came from. It's a teleport button with a cartoon aesthetic, and the translation of the name is genuinely poor fruit. And then the list of what counts as a thing gets longer than it should be. He can repel pain. He can repel fatigue. He can repel memories. He can repel Perona's ghosts, which aren't even solid. Kuma can put his hands on a concept and push it. I had to go back over that list the first time, because it slides straight past you. Pain isn't a substance. You cannot get hold of pain. It's a thing your nervous system is doing. It hasn't got edges, and this bloke has just picked it up and put it in a bag. And everybody in the scene reacts to that, all at once. They're all far too busy being frightened of the pause. That's already odd. But it's not the paradox. The paradox is the accounting rule. Extracted pain does not go away. It comes out of the body. It goes into a little paw-shaped bubble, and it sits there. And if nobody takes it, if nobody absorbs it into themselves, it goes back. Back into the person it came from, in full, exactly as it was. The bubble isn't a bin. It's a holding pattern. Suffering in this world obeys a conservation law. You can move it. You can hand it to someone else. You cannot destroy it. There's no setting on this fruit that makes pain stop existing. The best available outcome is that it ends up in a different person. And once you know that, Thriller Bark stops being a nice moment about loyalty and becomes something much colder. Because Kuma is not offering to delete Luffy's pain. He's never offered that. He can't. What he's offering is a transfer. There's a quantity of damage sitting in a bubble that has Luffy's name on it, and it is going home in a few minutes, unless somebody signs for it. Luffy, in the state he's in, will not survive that. So Kuma stands there and says, essentially, this is going into a body. Pick one. Zoro just volunteers to be the address. That's the trade. It's not a gesture, it's not symbolism, it's a logistics decision. Somebody was always going to feel every gram of it. Zoro puts his hand up and says, it'll be him, and then he stands there for the rest of the night with a captain's worth of accumulated agony poured into a body that had already lost a fight that evening. And I think the reason the nothing happened line hits like it does is precisely because the reader has been given the rules. If it were vague, if it were mystical, if it were just a nice bit of poetry about brotherhood, it'd be a decent panel. Because Oda established the physics in the same chapter, you know exactly how much is in that bubble and exactly where it went and exactly what he's standing in. The scene works because it's arithmetic. Now the thing that reframes all of it, which turns up hundreds of chapters later, and about 20 years too late for anyone to feel good about it. On Egghead, Bonnie finds a paw-shaped bubble in Vegapunk's lab. It's full of Kuma's memories, his own. Pushed out of himself, condensed, and stored on a shelf in a laboratory, because there was nowhere else for them to go. He couldn't delete them either. The rule applies to him. It applies to everyone. The man who could push suffering out of other people had to physically take his own history out of his skull and leave it in a jar with a label on it, because if he'd just extracted it and let go, it would have come straight back. He didn't erase his life, he filed it. And that's the closing bit, and I'll say it plainly because it doesn't need any help. Kuma spent years of his life as a man who removed people's pain, sat in a church in Sorbet, sick people, old people, people with nothing, and he'd put his hands on them and take it away for free because he was that sort of person. It's one of the loveliest character details in the series, and it's completely genuine. He wanted to help, and he had the perfect tool for it. Except the rule of his own power is that every gram went somewhere. He wasn't a healer. He was never a healer. He was a courier. He picked things up and he carried them and he set them down, and the arithmetic never once came out in anyone's favour. Somewhere in a bubble, in a jar, in a shelf, in another person's body, in his own head, all of it is still there. Every ache he ever lifted off a stranger's shoulders is still in the world. He just moved it about. And once you've noticed that, you start seeing it everywhere in this series, which is a thing we'll get to eventually. But for now, just this. A man in a church doing something kind with a power that has a strict and unbreakable conservation law, and no way at all to actually take anything away from anybody. Let's not do the plot for this one. Everyone knows the plot. Let's start with the folklore instead, because the folklore is real and Oda barely changed it. A Klabautermann is a North Sea legend. German sailors mostly, though the story gets around. It's a spirit that lives in a ship, and it looks like a small child in a sailor's raincoat and shoes, carrying a little wooden hammer. It's cheerful. It's hard-working. It bangs about below decks fixing things you didn't know were broken, and it turns up on deck to warn you when the ship's in danger. And the condition, in the actual legend, is the bit Oda kept. It only appears on a ship that has been properly loved. Not maintained, loved. And it only shows itself to the people who did the loving. That's it. That's a real thing sailors used to believe, and Oda lifted it more or less intact and put it in a comedy about pirates, and then used it to make several million people cry about a boat. Now, the evidence, Sky Pier, the Mary's been battered by Shura, and she's in a genuinely bad way, and overnight she gets repaired. Usopp sees a figure in the fog doing it, and the figure says something like, "Don't worry, I'll carry everyone a bit longer." And here's the detail that gets me every single time. She was repaired back into her original shape. Think about that. The Saruyama Alliance had modified her. They'd bolted things on to get her up the knock-up stream. Wings, essentially. Modifications. And whatever fixed her that night undid all of it. She came back the way she was when she was given to them in Syrup Village. Crudely done, but hers, whatever repaired that ship either didn't know about the upgrades or didn't want them. A ship with an opinion about her own refit. That's what we're dealing with. It's not a self-repair function because a self-repair function would have put back what was there yesterday. This was a preference. Then Eni's lobby, which escalates it into something genuinely uncanny. She sails from Water 7 to Eni's lobby. Nobody at the wheel, nobody at the sails. Through weather that should have finished a ship in that condition, on a route she has no reason to know, and she arrives at exactly the right moment. And then she drops her own rope ladder over the side. I want to sit on that for a second because it's such a small, domestic, absurdly touching thing to do. Not a heroic gesture. Not a broadside. She lowered the ladder because they'd need it to climb up. And putting the ladder down is the thing you do for people you're expecting. She could also talk by the end. At first only the crew could hear her, which fits the legend. Then at the funeral, the Straw Hat crew could hear her too, blokes who'd never sailed on her, which either means the rule loosened at the end, or it means that by then she wasn't only theirs anymore. And this is the awful bit. The spirit exists because they loved her. That's the input. That's the whole mechanism. A ship nobody cared about is just wood. The Klabautermann is made of affection, and the more affection goes in, the more of a person comes out. So the more they loved her, the more alive she became. And the more alive she became, the more the thing at the end of it was a killing rather than a scrapping. They made her a person by loving her, and then had to burn her because of what the loving had cost her. Because it did cost her. That's the other half of it. She got that battered by carrying them. Every hole in her is a thing they survived. The love is the reason there's someone in there to mourn, and the love is also the reason there's nothing left to save. Both. Same mechanism. It's not a tragedy that happened to the ship. It's a tragedy the ship was made of. And Usopp's position in the Water 7 argument makes a lot more sense once you hold it that way. Everyone reads that fight as Usopp being sentimental and Luffy being practical. But Usopp had seen her. He'd seen the little figure in the raincoat. He's not being soppy about a boat. He's standing there having met her, arguing with people who've been told about her secondhand. And Frankie's the one who explains it to him afterwards. Frankie, of all people, who at that point in the story has known Usopp for about 9 hours and is holding him hostage. He explains the Klabauterman, and then he makes the point that finishes it. If Usopp keeps sailing her and dies when she comes apart, the ship's soul will never forgive herself. That's the argument that actually lands, not it's just a ship. The opposite. She's a person and you're about to make her kill you. Now, the other angle, which I can't leave alone. By the end, almost none of the Merry was the Merry. She'd been blown up, impaled, sliced apart on multiple occasions. Wapol ate part of her. Actually, ate her. Usopp had been patching her continuously for the entire voyage, out of whatever was to hand in whatever weather, and Merry the butler's original boards had been replaced over and over and over. So what's burning at the end? It isn't the wood. The wood had turned over. The thing they loved wasn't the object they were given, it was the object they'd been repairing, which is a different object made of different material with the same name. It's a bit like a car in a family. 2 engines, a new door, a bonnet that doesn't quite match. You'd still call it the same car. You'd still be upset. And if somebody tried to be clever about it and point out that technically nothing original is left, you'd tell them to shut up, and you'd be right too, and you couldn't explain why. That's the Merry. She's whatever the repairs were done to, and the repairs are the point, and the repairs are also what killed her. And then Frankie builds the Sunny and says he hopes Merry's spirit carries over into her. There's a moment in the episode of Merry Special where a little Klabauterman turns up on the Sunny's sails, sitting up there smiling at them, and Usopp catches a glimpse, and it's gone. That's a special, mind you, not the manga. It's not something Oda drew, and I have to admit it's the right ending anyway, which is an irritating thing to have to admit about something that didn't officially happen. Because the logic holds. They loved the Sunny too. That's the input. If the mechanism is real, then the mechanism is real, and there's no rule that says a Klabauterman only gets one ship. Which leaves you with something quite nice to fall asleep on, actually. Somewhere out there, on a ship that's still sailing, there's possibly a small figure in a raincoat with a hammer, who has done this once before, and who knows exactly how it ends, and is doing it again anyway. Here's my favourite detail in the entire Egghead arc, and you cannot get it in English. In Japanese, each of the 6 satellites uses a different word for I. Shaka says watashi, Lilith says washi, Edison says wai, Pythagoras says boku, Atlas says ore, York says atai. Japanese has a whole shelf of first-person pronouns, and picking one is a genuine statement about who you are. Watashi is neutral and a bit formal. Washi is what an old man uses, or someone who thinks they're grand. Ore is blunt and masculine and a little rude. Boku is softer, younger. Atai is rough and feminine and slangy. Wai is Kansai dialect, which is the closest thing Japan has to a comedy accent. So 6 people who are all the same person, and the only way to tell them apart in the original script is which word they reach for when they refer to themselves. That's not a translation note. That's the entire theme of the arc, packed into a grammatical particle, and English just renders all 6 as I, and the whole thing evaporates. I think about that a lot. Somewhere in that gap is an argument about identity that most of us will never read. Right? The setup for anyone who's not been through Egghead. Dr. Vegapunk decided he wasn't working fast enough, so he split himself into 6. Each satellite carries one facet of him. Shaka is his good, Lilith is his evil, Edison is his thinking, Pythagoras is his wisdom, Atlas is his violence. York is his greed. All 6 of them refer to themselves as Dr. Vegapunk, because as far as they're concerned, that's what they are. They're not assistants, they're not clones in the sense of being lesser copies. They're him, divided, and then there's the original body, which he redesignated as Stella. That's the tell right there. That's the moment you realise what he actually thinks about all this. He didn't keep the original as the real one and call the others the copies. He never gave the original any number at all. He filed it as Unit 0 and put it in the same column as the rest. His own line about it is that all 6 together hold one complete copy of his personality, but they can do 6 times the work. All 6 together hold one complete copy, which is the first knot, and it's fatal. If the complete personality only exists across all 6, then no single one of them is Vegapunk. Not Shaka, not Lilith, not Stella. The original body doesn't hold the whole thing either, because the whole thing has been distributed. What you've got is a committee, and Vegapunk is the name of the committee, not of any of the people in it. And it's a committee that argues. They talk over each other. They disagree about strategy. They wind each other up. 6 aspects of one man's mind in 6 rooms, sending each other messages and getting annoyed. And eventually, one of them commits treason against the other 5. York, the greed one, who betrays everybody in the hope of being made a celestial dragon. And I want to be a bit unkind about this for a moment, because I think it's the funniest and bleakest thing in the arc. He built a person out of nothing but wanting things. That was the design brief. Take the part of me that wants, separate it out, give it a body and a voice and its own opinions and a seat at the table, and then act astonished when it wants something. Every self-improvement scheme that involves partitioning your worst trait into its own body has exactly one possible ending. It has never gone any other way in any story anyone has ever told. And the smartest man in the world did it anyway. And he did it because it was efficient, which is precisely the reasoning of a man who has separated out the part of himself that would have said, "This is a terrible idea." Although, to be fair to him, York's practical function was genuinely useful. Because of her, Vegapunk no longer needed to eat or use the toilet. That's what she was for. She did the appetite so the rest of him could work. That's the level of optimization we're dealing with. He outsourced digestion, now the machinery because it matters for what comes next. Punk Records sits on the upper level of the lab, and it's his brain. Not a computer, his actual brain in a tank, having outgrown his skull years ago because of the Nomi Nomi Nomi, which grows your brain in proportion to what you learn. It's linked to all of them by antenna, and every day their memories sync back to it. Every day. All 6 lives, uploaded, merged, filed, so the second knot, Stella dies. Kizaru shoots Vegapunk's original Stella body during the Egghead Buster call, and the Stella body dies and Vegapunk dies with it. Lilith says it out loud later. The other satellites may have physically died, but they're still alive in a sense. And St. Mars stands in front of the brain in the tank and stares at it and wonders, genuinely wonders, whether the man is in there somewhere. Which is where this stops being a science fiction problem and becomes a problem you can't get out of with more information. Because think about what test you'd run. You want to know which one is really Vegapunk. Alright, check the memories. All of them have all of them synced daily. Check the reasoning. Shared knowledge, that's the whole design, not identical reasoning. Check whether they answer to the name. All 6 do sincerely, without hesitation. Check the original body. The original body has been formally reclassified by its own occupant as one unit among 7, and is now dead. And the thing everyone calls Vegapunk carried on regardless. You've run out of instruments. That's the bit. Not, we don't know yet. Not, Oda hasn't said. You've physically run out of things to measure. Because every property you could check for is present in all of them and missing from none. The question is well formed. It's grammatical. It sounds like it should have an answer, and there is nothing left in the world you could point a tool at, which is a very unusual place to end up, and Oda gets there in about 4 chapters while everyone's watching a robot fight. And the comparison that always occurs to me is a band that's been going 40 years and has none of the original members. Is it still the band? Everyone's got a strong opinion, everyone's certain, nobody can prove theirs, and the arguments always collapse into people just asserting things at each other with increasing volume. Except in Vegapunk's case, the band members all sincerely believe they're the founder. They all have his memories, they all have his handwriting, and one of them has just shot one of the other 5. And the brain's still in the tank, still ticking over, still, presumably, sinking. Napoleon. That's where I want to start. Not with the fruit, not with Big Mum, not with whole cake, just Napoleon. A hat, a bicorn sitting on a woman's head with a face on it that talks, has opinions about how the fight's going, and can turn into a sword. Everyone accepted that instantly. Everyone read that chapter and went, right, talking hat, sure. And then moved on to worrying about the wedding cake. Nobody stops to ask what Napoleon is. So, the Soru no Mi. The user can pull a soul out of a person. If they take the whole thing, that person dies on the spot. If they take a fragment, that person loses years off their life. The soul comes out as a sort of tangible pink smoke, and the user can hold it. And then you can push a fragment into an object, and the object wakes up. That's how you get a talking hat. That's how you get Zeus, who is a cloud, Prometheus, who is a small sun, every lamp and door and tree and river in Toto Land that says hello to you as you walk past. Now, there's a precondition nobody talks about, and it's a lovely piece of design. Soul Pocus only works if the target is afraid. She has to speak to the soul's attachment to life, and that only gets a grip if the person's frightened. Life or treasure. Life or your ship. Life or whatever she happens to want. If you're not scared, the words don't catch, and the strongest technique of a Yonko simply doesn't function. So the hard counter to one of the 4 emperors is not being scared of her. That's it. That's the whole thing. Jinbei walks up and offers her his arm, and she can't do a thing about it, because there's no fear in the man to hook onto. I genuinely think that's one of the best power designs in the series, and it's mostly played for gags because the arc is a wedding farce, and there's a bloke made of biscuits in it. The homies are alive. There's no wriggling out of that. They talk, they have preferences, they get frightened, they beg for their lives, they form attachments, they have favourite things. If a thing can be scared of dying, the argument about whether it's really alive has already been lost. And what they're alive on is somebody's lifespan. Subtracted. Somewhere on Whole Cake Island, there's a person who is going to die younger than they should have. And the difference between the life they'd have had and the life they're getting is currently a lamp in a corridor saying good evening to people. Every talking chair in Toto Land is a receipt. That's the thing I can't get past. It's an island of cheerful, chatty, friendly furniture. And it's all been paid for out of the years of the people living there. The place is delightful. It's got singing cakes. It's built on a kind of theft that doesn't leave a mark on anyone and doesn't show up in any ledger and takes decades off strangers who will never know exactly how many. Now Zeus, who I do not know what to do with, Zeus is a fragment of Big Mum's own soul, not somebody else's, hers. She tore a piece off herself and put it in a thundercloud, and he develops a personality. He gets a sense of humour, he gets greedy about snacks, he gets fond of Nami, because Nami is nice to him, and nobody's ever been nice to him before, on account of him being a weather system belonging to a woman who is not nice to anybody. And then he refuses to obey her. A piece of a woman's soul disobeys the woman. I've been chewing on that one for years and I still don't have anywhere to put it. It's played entirely as comedy. It's the cloud doing a funny face while she screams at him. But what's actually depicted on the page is a person's own soul developing separate preferences and then defecting to the enemy over a snack. And the story treats this as a running joke rather than a metaphysical emergency. If a fragment of you can want something you don't want, then what exactly was the fragment of? What was it a piece of? You'd think a piece of Linlin would be Linlin-shaped. Instead, you get a cloud who mostly wants a quiet life, and to be told he's done well, which raises the extremely uncomfortable possibility that the version of her in that cloud is what she'd have been if she hadn't been Big Mum. But I'm not going to push that because it's a theory and I said I wouldn't do theories. Now, a fun detail, because this one is properly funny. A loose soul fragment goes into whatever it touches first. Whatever it touches first. There's no aiming, there's no guidance. It's a physical object and it obeys physics, and if you throw it, it will land somewhere. So when Big Mum decides Zeus is a failure and builds Hera to replace him, and then throws Zeus's soul at Hera to be eaten, Hera actually bites into him. Not at all. Nami's climax is nearby, and Zeus goes into that instead and lives. Immortality by clerical error. A woman tried to have her own soul fragment eaten by her other soul fragment and fumbled the throw, and now he's got a whole new body and a girl who likes him. And then there's the vivre card rule, which I think is the strangest of the lot. Homies cannot harm anyone holding one of Big Mum's vivre cards. Can't. Physically won't, because the vivre card has a scrap of her soul in it, and the soul recognises itself. So she's built a security system out of her own essence, and it does not distinguish friend from enemy. It doesn't do allegiance, it doesn't do intent. It does one thing, which is check whether the thing in front of it is her, and if the answer's yes, it stands down. Which is exactly how you get your entire island's defence grid neutralised by a bit of paper. It's a system that can only ask one question, and the question isn't, should I attack this person? It's, is this me? And those turn out to be very different questions. Once someone's nicked the paper, and the last one, which I'll leave sitting on the shelf. Carmel, the original user of the fruit, the woman who raised Linlin, the child trafficker with the kind face. Carmel vanished, and at that exact moment, the power was in Linlin's hands. Nobody knows how. The series has never explained the mechanism, and it's been a very long time, and Oda knows exactly how many people are waiting on that one. There's an obvious answer that everyone has already reached, and I'm not going to say it, because it isn't confirmed and because the not saying is more fun. But whatever happened in that clearing, the fruit changed hands the same day, and the woman who could take souls out of people simply stopped being anywhere. A locked church, a little girl who can't go outside, and a very large man sitting on the floor, telling her a bedtime story about a sun god. That's the origin of one of the most conceptually mad powers in the series, and I want to build up to it properly, because if I just tell you what it does, it'll sound like nonsense. Jewellery. Bonnie's fruit is the Toshi Toshi no Mi. Age. The baseline is straightforward enough. She can change how old someone is. Hers, yours, anybody's. Forward, backward, and she can do it through a weapon, so she can hit you with a pipe, and you're 4. It's got some brilliant applications. She can age metal, which means she can rust a sword to powder in about a second. She can turn a lethal opponent into an infant on the floor. She turned Vegapunk into a small child, which was very funny, and also, if you think about it for 2 seconds, absolutely horrifying. But that's not the interesting part. The interesting part is called distorted future. Bonnie doesn't predict a future version of herself. She becomes one, physically, in the room. Right now, she imagines a version of herself that could exist at some point ahead of her, and then she is that. A giant, a hardened warrior, a different build, a different race, a different set of capabilities entirely. Whatever she can picture herself eventually becoming, she can borrow it, briefly, and bring it back to the present. And here's the rule that turns it from a power into a paradox. The strength of the transformation depends on how sincerely she believes the future is actually possible. Vegapunk's read on it is that the fruit runs on human imagination. That's the fuel. Not stamina, not haki, not training. Belief. And the corollary is stated fairly plainly, and I don't think enough people have sat with it. The more you know about what's actually possible, the weaker you get. It's a superpower with an inverse relationship to education. Every fact you learn about how the world really works is a future you can no longer reach. Every time you become more realistic, your ceiling comes down. And children are explicitly better at it, because children haven't yet been told which things are stupid. I've never seen another power like that. Usually the trade is your body, or your lifespan, or your sanity. Here the trade is your grip on reality, and you have to pay it forwards by refusing to acquire one. So, Bonnie becomes Nika, not because she has the fruit. Somebody else has the fruit, and he's standing right next to her at the time. She becomes Nika because Kuma told her about him. From when she was 5, in a room she was not allowed to leave, being slowly killed by an illness nobody could treat, with a father who couldn't fix any of it and could only sit there and describe a figure who makes everything all right and laughs while he does it. She believed it the way you can only believe something when you're 5 and stuck, and it's the only good thing you've got. And then 20 odd years later, in the middle of a battlefield, standing next to the actual sun god, she reached the awakened form of a mythical Zoan she does not possess. Through sincerity. Through sincerity. That's the mechanism. Not a fruit, not a bloodline, not a hidden lineage. She just meant it hard enough. Now, put that next to the filing cabinet. The world government spent the whole of its existence keeping Nika out of the world. Renaming, reclassifying, burning records, chasing a fruit across every sea they controlled. Enormous effort, sustained across generations, mostly successful. And a child in a locked church imagined him back in without the fruit. Which tells you the censorship didn't fail because it was leaky. It failed because you cannot classify a story. You can lock up an object, you can put an object in a vault and post guards on it. You cannot put guards on the idea of somebody coming to get you out, because the idea doesn't live anywhere. And the more miserable you make the world, the more places it grows. They were never fighting a fruit. They were fighting a rumour with a filing system. Now I want to defend Oda on this one, because there's a version of this power that's genuinely rubbish. Believe in yourself and you'll win is the laziest thing a shonen manga can do. It's the sort of thing that makes people who don't read manga feel smug about not reading manga, and they're not entirely wrong too. Oda dodges it in 2 ways, and they're both good. First, belief costs something. It costs your ability to see straight. That's not free. A person who can reach any future they can picture is, by construction, a person who has to stay a bit unreasonable forever. And there's a whole life in that trade-off that the story doesn't have time for, but which is clearly there. Second, and more importantly, it's fragile. She can't hold it. It burns out. She reverts, panting, back to being an ordinary woman with an ordinary body, and the moment's gone. Which is exactly what belief actually does. That's the honest version. You don't get to stay convinced, you get a stretch of it, and you do as much as you can while it lasts, and then it drains out of you, and you're standing in a car park at 3:30 in the morning wondering what you were thinking. Making it temporary is what makes it true. And then there's the detail that ties this one off, and I'm going to say it flatly and not comment, because it doesn't need me. Bonnie didn't find her fruit. Saturn extracted the power and fed it to her. She was a newborn. It was an experiment. One of the 5 elders, in a lab, on purpose, took the fruit that lets a person reach any future they can imagine and administered it to an infant who would go on to spend her entire childhood locked in a room with nothing to do but listen to stories about a god who breaks people out of places. They manufactured the one thing on the planet that could stand next to Nika and match him. Deliberately, roughly 20 years ahead of schedule. And then they left her somewhere with nothing to think about. No comment. Just the facts of it. Start with the material, because the material is an engineering achievement and nobody ever treats it as one. The poneglyphs are enormous cubic blocks of stone, scattered across the world, covered in a script that almost nobody can read. Professor Clover says they're unbreakable. Not tough, not durable, unbreakable. Nothing in this world, which contains admirals who turn into magma and a man who can level an island by being annoyed, has managed to so much as chip one. Somebody sat down, back in the century nobody is allowed to discuss, and solved a specific problem. The problem was, how do I say something that cannot be shouted over? Not how do I hide it. Hiding is easy, and hiding fails because whoever's coming has time and you don't. The problem they solved was durability. They wanted a sentence to survive the deliberate, sustained, well-resourced efforts of the people who are about to win, for as long as those people held power, which has turned out to be quite a long while, and counting. And they did it. That's the thing. They actually did it. The blocks are still there. The sentence is still on them. The winners have been in charge for 800 years, and they have not been able to delete one word. So the winners did the only thing left, which gives us the first knot. They made reading them a crime. That's not a strategy. That's a surrender with better public relations. Every banned poneglyph is a sign that says, in effect, there is something written here worth banning. The prohibition is a citation. It confirms the contents are real, dangerous, and specific to anybody paying the slightest attention. They couldn't break the stone, so they broke the readers instead. Countless scholars over the centuries killed for the crime of knowing an alphabet, which brings us to O'Hara, and I want to do this without dressing it up, because it's better plain. 22 years before the story starts, on an island in the West Blue, there was a library, a tree actually, with a library inside it, which is exactly the sort of thing this series does, and then never mentions again. The people who worked there were archaeologists. They had been quietly studying the Forbidden Century for a long time, and they thought they'd got away with it. CP9 went in, then the buster call. The tree burned. The island burned. There were 2 survivors, and one of them was a child. The place was taken off the map. Not metaphorically, it was removed from maps so that people would grow up not knowing there had ever been an island there. And that's the whole incident. I'm not going to make it exciting. It shouldn't be exciting. It's a government destroying a library and everybody in it, which is a thing that has happened enough times in real history that dramatising it feels a bit off. Now the second knot, which is the reason I wanted this section in here at all. The world government needed a cover story. You can't just annihilate an island of academics and say nothing. So they told the world that the O'Hara scholars had been hunting the ancient weapons in order to destroy the world. Read that again. To justify a genocide, they publicly confirmed that world-ending weapons exist and are findable. They had one secret to protect, and they spent a bigger one paying for it. Before O'Hara, the ancient weapons were nothing. A rumour, if that. After O'Hara, they were an official government position. A few pirates and revolutionaries and ambitious admirals on the planet now had only rumours and forbidden research to tell them that there are 3 objects out there capable of ending everything, and that they can be located by reading rocks. They plugged one leak by opening a larger one. And I'd argue this is the single dumbest smart thing any government does in fiction, because it's a decision made by clever people under pressure that solves the immediate problem and creates a permanent one, which is exactly how real institutions fail. Then there's Robin. They made the crime knowing how to read, and then they chased a child across the world for 2 decades for the crime of having been taught. She was 8. Nobody consults you at 8 about which alphabet you're going to learn. She sat in a lesson the way children do, and the lesson turned out to be a capital offence, and the sentence was the rest of her life. Every group she joined betrayed her, which is a detail I think gets underappreciated. It's not that she was hunted, it's that being near her was expensive, and people kept doing the sums. And then, the third knot, Rayleigh. This is the one that stops me because it isn't a plot mechanism at all. It's a choice a person makes. Rayleigh knows. He was on the ship. Roger's crew followed the poneglyphs, reached the last island, and found out what happened during the century nobody's allowed to discuss. He was standing there. He has the entire thing in his head. And when Robin, who has spent her whole life being hunted for wanting exactly this, whose mother died for it, whose island was taken off the map for it, sits down in front of him, he offers to just tell her. He offers, and she says no, and he lets her say no. That's the bit. The one man alive who could end an 800-year cover-up with a single sentence, sitting opposite the one woman alive who could use it, and he says fine, go find it yourself. And he means it. He says something about how he thinks his crew and the O'Hara scholars were both too hasty, that knowing it now, in her current situation, would do nothing except make her a person who knows it. She wouldn't be able to act on it. She'd just be carrying it around. He isn't protecting the secret. Let's be very clear about that. He doesn't care about the secret. He's a retired pirate in a shack with a drinking problem and no love for anyone in Mary Joyce. He's protecting her from being the person who knows before she can do anything about it, which is a distinction I don't think I'd have had the discipline to make, because Roger knew, and Roger died anyway, knowing it didn't save him, and it didn't fix anything, and he laughed about it and got on the scaffold. That's Rayleigh's evidence. He's watched this exact information land on a person before, and it didn't help. So here's what I keep coming back to. The history in this world isn't hidden. That's the part that took me ages to notice. It's not lost, it's not encrypted, it's not buried under a mountain. It's carved into indestructible rock and sitting out in the open, in a handful of specific places, and quite a few people know roughly where. It's just inconvenient to reach, that's all. It's written in a language you'd essentially have to be raised in a murdered village to read. And the villages keep getting murdered. And so the sentence sits there, perfectly legible for anyone who happens to be the last surviving graduate of a school that no longer exists. It's not a mystery, it's an accessibility problem, which is somehow worse. Right, so here's the one that ties the rest of them together, and I don't think it was designed to. I've been dancing around this rule for the whole video, and it's time to actually explain it, because it's the load-bearing bit of physics in this entire world, and it gets treated as a footnote. When a devil fruit user dies, the fruit comes back. Not their fruit exactly. The power regenerates. It reappears somewhere in the world, in an ordinary-looking piece of fruit, on a tree or in a bowl or in a crate on somebody's ship, ready to be eaten by whoever wanders past. That's how these things have circulated for centuries. That's how anything ends up in anyone's hands. There's no factory. There's no supply. There's just a very long game of pass the parcel that's been running since before anybody was keeping records. Which means an execution is not a removal. It's a shuffle. That's all it's ever been. You kill a fruit user and the power goes back into the pot, and the pot is the entire world, and you do not get to pick who reaches into it next. So every kill order the world government has ever issued against a devil fruit user, every single one, has been a decision to take a known quantity out of a known pair of hands and redistribute it at random to somebody they have never met. And the cleanest example of this is the one everyone already knows, and nobody frames this way. They tried to execute Ace, publicly, at enormous cost, in a war that levelled Marineford and finished Whitebeard and rearranged the balance of the entire world. The Mera no Mi went back into circulation, and then it turned up as a tournament prize, in Dressrosa, on a stage, with a crowd. And it went to Sabo, the Chief of Staff of the Revolutionary Army, the one person alive most guaranteed to point it directly at Mary Joyce. They took the fire fruit off a young man who mostly wanted to find his dad and handed it, via a chain of events they set in motion themselves, to a professional revolutionary whose entire job is dismantling them. And they did all of that on purpose, at great expense, over roughly 2 years, and I don't think anyone in that organisation has ever sat down and done the sums on it. Now the big one. Roger. They killed the Pirate King in public. That was the plan. Get him up on a platform in Loguetown, in front of the largest crowd anybody could assemble, and end the age of piracy by demonstrating that even the best of them finishes on a scaffold. And he used it to start the Great Pirate Era. One line, that's all it took. They gave him a stage, an audience, and a captive world's undivided attention. And he pointed at the horizon and told everybody his treasure was out there somewhere, and the sea filled with ships. The scaffold was a microphone, that's all it was. They built him the biggest platform in the history of the world, and handed him the last word. You'd think somebody would have caught that in the planning meeting. You'd think there'd have been a bloke at the back going, "Hang on, we're giving him a speech." And the pattern holds all the way down, once you're looking for it. Toki's fruit going back on the shelf, Carmel's fruit landing in Linlin's hands the same afternoon, Kuma's memories in a jar in a lab, Luffy's pain going into Zoro, the Merry getting up and walking onto somebody else's sails. Same rule every time, doing the same thing, in a different coat. So here's the thing, and I'll say it once and then leave it alone, because it isn't a thesis, and I don't want it to sound like one. Nothing in One Piece gets deleted. That's the rule. Not good triumphs, not the will of D lives on, nothing that grand. Just an inventory rule. Pain moves, fruits recirculate, souls jump into whatever they happen to touch. Memories go in jars, histories go into stone. A ship comes back as a small figure on somebody else's sails. The world has an enormous, extremely active second-hand market and absolutely no delete key, which is why the government keeps losing, incidentally. They're an institution whose entire method is removal, operating in a universe where removal is not one of the available functions. They can move things. They can make things hard to find. They can kill every single person who knows a thing, and the thing sits there in a rock, being perfectly legible, waiting for the next person who happens to learn the alphabet. There's one exception, and I'll just state it rather than make a thing of it. Time. The one fruit that touches it can't go back, and every other power that gets near the subject has been fenced the same way. You can preview the next 3 seconds and not trust it. You can reach a future you believe in and not hold it. So everything in this world gets a second owner, except the years. That's the exception. Right. Moving on. There's a whale at the entrance to the Grand Line who's been banging his head against a wall for 50 years. That's where I want to start, because it's the sort of image you can just leave in the room. Reverse mountain. There's a lighthouse and an old man called Crocus and a whale the size of an island called Laboon, who swims up to the red line every day and slams his face into it. He's been doing it long enough that his skull is scarred and his teeth are wrecked, and Crocus has been living inside him, part-time, as a sort of on-call physician, because a creature that self-harms on that scale needs someone in there patching it up. He's waiting for his friends. 50 years ago, a crew of pirates came through with a whale calf following them, and they couldn't take him into the Grand Line because it would have killed him. So they left him at the lighthouse and said they'd be back, and they died. Obviously, they died. Everyone dies in this series. That's rather the point of the Grand Line. They died somewhere out there, and nobody ever came to tell him, because there was nobody left to come. So the whale waits, and the reason he keeps hitting the mountain is that he thinks if he can just get through it, he'll find them on the other side. Now, the other half of this, which is the bit that makes it more than just a sad story. One of them made it. Brook was on that crew. Brook is alive, in the loosest possible sense of the word, and has been the entire time, on the wrong side of the wall, about a day's sail away, unable to leave. And how he's alive is its own thing entirely. The Yomi Yomi Nomi is a fruit that does nothing at all. That's how it's introduced. Brook ate it and got precisely no benefit from it, and spent his whole life being mocked for having wasted one. Because the power is that you get one resurrection after you die, and there is genuinely no way to test that in advance. So the Rumbar pirates get poisoned. Everyone dies, including Brook. And the fruit does its job. His soul comes back, and it can't find him. That's the part I want to spend a minute on, because it's dropped as a gag, and it is one of the most horrifying things in the series. The fruit brings your soul back, and your soul has to return to your body. Fine. Except Brooke died in the Florian Triangle, which is a permanent fog bank in which nothing has a bearing and nothing has a landmark, and his soul spent a year wandering around in there looking for the ship it had come out of. A year, lost as a soul, in a fog, with no body, no hands, no voice, nothing to do but keep looking. And when he found it, the body had been sitting in the same fog for 12 months, and there was nothing left but bones. He got in anyway, because that's the deal, and he stood up as a skeleton, and the reason he's recognisable as himself is his afro, which survived, because it was very good hair. That's a joke. That's genuinely written as a joke. The bloke's got a running gag about his hair, and the gag is load-bearing, because if the afro hadn't held, he'd have come back as an anonymous skeleton, with no face and nobody to be. And then he was alone, on a ship full of his friends' bodies for decades. Not months, decades in the fog, unable to leave, because the sea was hostile, and he was one man, and the ship wasn't going anywhere. So, the whale is smashing his head into a mountain waiting for a crew that's dead, and one of that crew is on the other side of the mountain, unable to get to him, and has been the whole time, and both of them are keeping a promise to each other that neither of them can complete. Neither of them is wrong. That's what does it. Laboon isn't deluded. He's right. Somebody did survive. His faith is entirely justified, and it's still ruining him. And Brooke isn't giving up either. He wants to go back. He's been wanting to go back the entire time. He simply cannot, because the Grand Line doesn't do returns, and a skeleton with no crew doesn't get a vote. Two creatures, both keeping faith, both correct, both suffering because of it, separated by a wall for the whole of it. Now, the thing that finishes it, which I think is one of the best pieces of writing Oda has ever done, and it happens in about chapter 105. Luffy doesn't know any of this. He's never heard of Brooke. He's about 8 chapters into the Grand Line, and he's got no idea what he's looking at. He just sees a whale hitting a wall and gets the gist of it out of Crocus, and does the only thing he can think of. He fights the whale, punches it in the face, declares it a draw, and says they'll finish the fight when he comes back. Then he paints his Jolly Roger on the side of it in about 4 seconds with a bucket of paint, and tells Laboon that as long as that mark's there, he has to wait, because Luffy is definitely coming back for a rematch. That's not a kindness, technically. He's just given the whale another lifetime of waiting, except it works. Because what Laboon needed wasn't to stop waiting. Waiting is what he does, it's who he is, he's not going to stop. What he needed was for the waiting to be for something that could actually turn up. Luffy didn't cure him, he gave him a better appointment, and then hundreds of chapters later, a skeleton walks onto his ship, and the two facts are in the same room, and Luffy doesn't know it yet, and won't for ages, and it's just sitting there. I don't have a clever finish for this one. It's just quite lovely, and I think about the whale more often than is reasonable for a grown adult. Since we're at the entrance to the Grand Line anyway, let's talk about the entrance to the Grand Line, because the geography of this world is quietly insane, and everybody accepted it in about 2001 without complaint. Here's the layout. There's a mountain range called the Red Line that runs all the way around the planet. There's a sea called the Grand Line that runs all the way around the planet the other way, at right angles to it. The two of them cross in 2 places, and between them they carve the world into 4 separate oceans that don't really talk to each other. And along both sides of the Grand Line, for its entire length, there are 2 belts of dead water, called the calm belts. No wind, not a breath, no current. The sea in the calm belt is a mirror, permanently, and a sailing ship that goes in does not come out, because there is nothing to push it. And underneath the calm belt, in the still water, live the Sea Kings, which are the size of countries. So the most dangerous sea on the planet is fenced off on both sides by a thing that will not let you sail, patrolled by animals that could eat a fleet without noticing. which leaves exactly one way in. You go up the mountain, reverse mountain is at the crossing point, and it does something that I want to be quite precise about, because it's genuinely one of the maddest things in the series, and it's explained in half a page. The currents from all four seas converge on that one spot and run up the mountain. Uphill. The water climbs the red line, meets at the summit in a canal, and then pours down the other side into the Grand Line. That's the door. That's the only door. To enter the most dangerous ocean in the world, you sail your wooden ship at a mountain, get picked up by a river that is going the wrong way, get carried thousands of feet into the air, and then get flung down the far side at a speed that will destroy you if your hull isn't up to it. And if you miss the canal, you hit the mountain. That's it. That's the whole margin for error. You are aiming a boat at a rock at the top of a waterfall that runs backwards, and if you're off by a few degrees, the sea kills you against a wall. I love this. I love it unreservedly. It is exactly the sort of thing a person invents when they are 22 and having a brilliant time, and nobody has told them no yet. And there's something quite nice buried in that. The world's most dangerous sea is protected by its own front door. Think about who this filters. It doesn't filter cowards. Cowards were never coming anyway. It filters the unprepared and the unlucky, which are different populations entirely, and it does it before anybody's fought anybody. The Grand Line doesn't need to be dangerous to keep people out. It's already got a mountain that eats ships, and a pair of dead seas full of monsters. Everything past that is surplus. The sea has already made its selection at the front gate, and it made it on the basis of navigation and shipbuilding rather than courage, which is why the crews you meet in there are so uniformly competent and so uniformly strange. Everyone in the Grand Line got in by pointing a boat at a wall and being right. And then, once you're in, the sea gets worse in a way that's almost funny. There's no north. Magnetic north doesn't work in there. Every island has its own magnetic field, and they're all pulling in different directions, and the effect is that a compass just spins. So you can't navigate the way anybody in the world has ever navigated. You need a log pose, which is a little glass ball that locks onto the magnetism of one specific island ahead of you, and then you go there. Not because you want to, because that's where the needle points. You do not choose your route. You choose which needle to follow, and the sea decides the rest. Some islands take a day to log, some take a week, some take a year, and if you're unlucky enough to land on one of those, you're simply staying for a year. Unless you have an eternal pose or some other special navigation method, there's no other way off using an ordinary compass. You wait for a piece of glass to make up its mind. And if the log pose breaks, that's it. You are done. You're on an island with no compass, no north, and no route, in a sea where guessing gets you killed, and your only remaining option is to sit there until somebody else's ship happens past and takes pity. Which is why every crew in the Grand Line treats that little glass ball the way you'd treat the only key to your own house, and why Nami spends half the series holding her wrist above her head like she's carrying a wounded bird. The whole ocean runs on one fragile object per ship, and everybody just accepts it. So this is a sea where the water goes the wrong way. North doesn't exist. The weather changes with no warning at all because you're crossing between climate zones every few days, and the only reliable instrument on the ship is a compass that has been hypnotized by an island. And people sail it constantly. Thousands of them. Every day. It's absolutely rammed. That's the bit that finishes it for me. All of that, every hostile piece of design, every wall and dead sea and spinning needle, and the response of the human population of that world was to go anyway, in enormous numbers, mostly on inadequate boats. Because a man once said something nice about treasure on a scaffold. You can build a door like Reverse Mountain, and it will not stop anybody. It'll just make sure that the ones who get through are exactly the sort of people you didn't want. And here's the one that's been sitting in plain sight since chapter 1. The most powerful people in this world are physically allergic to the sea. That's it. That's the whole observation. This is a story about the ocean. Many characters are sailors. The entire economy, the entire military, the entire geography, everything runs on ships. And the strongest individuals alive, almost without exception, would drown in a paddling pool. Whitebeard couldn't swim, Ace couldn't swim, Blackbeard can't, Kaido can't, Big Mum can't, Law can't. Luffy has not been able to swim since he was 7 years old, in a world made almost entirely of water, and has nearly drowned so many times that the running total is a bit of a state. Every single one of them ate a fruit, and the price was the sea. Now the mechanics, as far as anyone's pinned them down, because Oda's been a bit slippery about the edges. It's submersion. Get a fruit user properly into water, and the strength goes out of them completely. Not gradually, immediately. They go limp, they can't move, and if nobody hauls them out, they die. But rain is fine. Rain's never bothered anyone. Sweat's fine. A drink is fine, obviously, or half the cast would have died at a party by now. Nami throws water at people constantly, and nobody dissolves. So it's not water as a substance, it's water as a place. It's about being in it rather than being touched by it. And I don't think that's ever been fully nailed down. And honestly, I think Oda would rather we didn't ask. Sea stone's the same principle in a solid. It gives off the energy of the sea, and pressing it against a fruit user does the same thing as dunking them. Which means the entire prison system, the entire marine restraint infrastructure, is built out of a rock that pretends to be the ocean. And I think that's a lovely bit of design, because it means the world government's answer to the most powerful people alive isn't a weapon. It's a handcuff made of fake seawater. They don't beat these people, they just remind them what they gave up. And the reminder is enough to put a man who can turn into magma on the floor. Impel Down is a building whose entire function is to do an impression of the sea, convincingly enough that the sea's own price comes due indoors, 6 floors underground, nowhere near any water at all. And here's what that costs. This is a world where power and freedom are traded against each other directly. Take the fruit, and you get something extraordinary. You can turn into fire. You can manipulate space within a room. You can put a hand on somebody's pain and lift it off. Genuinely godlike in some cases, and the story does not undersell it. And the price is that you can never be at home in the thing that everybody in this world is supposed to love. A pirate who can't swim is a contradiction. He's chosen the sea as his whole life, and he can't be in it. He can be on it forever, on a plank of wood. And if the plank fails, he's finished in a way that a 10-year-old fisherman's son would not be. Every fruit user on every ship in the Grand Line is riding round on top of the thing that would kill them instantly. All day, every day, and mostly not thinking about it. And that's the trade, power and permanent estrangement from the world you claim. Which is why the fruit is a devil fruit, and why the sea is the devil's price, and why the metaphor is so blunt that it took me about 15 years to notice it was a metaphor at all. I want to do one specific case because it's the best one. Luffy's entire dream is out at sea. His whole identity is the ocean. He wants to be the freest man alive, and he defines that in terms of sailing wherever he likes. He ate the fruit at 7, by accident, because he was hungry and it was on a table, so the single most sea-obsessed person in the story bought his power with his ability to be in the sea. Before he knew what the sea was, before he'd made a single decision about his life, in an act of pure childish greed that took about 4 seconds. He didn't choose, he didn't weigh it up, he wasn't offered terms, he picked up somebody's chest and ate what was inside it because it was there, and the bill arrived immediately and has never stopped arriving. And here's the thing I find genuinely quite moving about it, and then I'll leave it. He's never once complained, not one panel. In 1,000-odd chapters, that man has never sat down and been sad about not being able to swim. He nearly dies of it constantly. It has cost him fights. It has cost him hours of his life at the bottom of various bodies of water, and he has never treated it as a loss. He just gets other people to carry him. That's his solution. He can't swim, so Jinbei swims, and Luffy hangs on. He can't swim, so Sanji goes in after him. He can't swim, so somebody's always got a hand out. Which is, I think, the actual answer to the whole trade. You give up being able to do the thing alone. And in exchange, if you're extremely lucky and quite likeable, you get people who'll do it for you. Not much of a bargain on paper. Seems to be working out for him. One more, and it's a light one, because it's late. Buggy the Clown is one of the 4 most powerful people in the world. That's not a joke setup. That's the current state of the map. There are 4 emperors of the sea, and one of them is a bloke whose devil fruit lets him come apart into pieces, who has never won a serious fight, who cannot swim, who is afraid of essentially everything, and who has been failing upward for 25 years with the sincere terror of a man being carried along by a crowd. And every single thing on his record is true, and also completely fictitious. I want to be precise about that, because Buggy got lucky is the version everybody says, and it isn't quite right. Luck would mean the facts are wrong. The facts aren't wrong. Every line on his CV would survive an audit. He sailed on Roger's ship. True. He was a pirate apprentice who mostly did the washing up, but the record says he sailed with the Pirate King, and the record isn't lying. He was in Impel Down. True. He got in after being captured and spent the whole time trying to leave, but there's photographic evidence of him standing next to Monkey D. Dragon's son during the biggest jailbreak in history. He was at Marineford. True. He stood on a platform in front of the entire world during the largest war anybody had ever seen, and he did it because he was cornered and out of options and thought some publicity might help, and he ended up on the front page of every newspaper on the planet, standing between Whitebeard and the Navy. He led an army of escaped convicts. Also true, they followed him out of Impel Down because he was making a lot of noise and moving in a direction which is roughly all leadership has ever been from the outside. He was running away. They read it as a charge. Nobody checked. He was made a warlord. True. The government did that themselves, on purpose, on paper, because it was politically convenient, and then acted as though they had been forced into it. Every fact is accurate. The conclusion the world drew from those facts is wrong in every particular. And there is no correction available, because there's nothing to correct. That's the knot. And I think it's a genuinely sharp one. You cannot debunk Buggy. There's no lie to expose. He's never claimed anything he didn't do. He has simply been present, repeatedly, at the largest events of his era, by accident, terrified, trying to leave. And the world has been watching, and the world does the interpreting. The reputation isn't built on falsehood. It's built on proximity, and proximity is a fact, and facts are what reputations are made of. And then his crew. He's got Mihawk and Crocodile working for him. The greatest swordsman in the world, and a former warlord, both of whom know exactly what he is, both of whom find him ridiculous, and both of whom are on the org chart underneath him, because the org chart is a document, and documents don't care. He built an organisation for hiring out mercenaries, mostly to get out of a hole, and it turned into a world power because 2 extremely dangerous men decided it was a convenient shell to operate from, and now the world reads that as Buggy having recruited them. The paperwork says he's their boss, and the paperwork is, in every meaningful institutional sense, the truth. There's no other file, and here's the bit that makes me laugh every time. He's genuinely trying to stop it. That's what people miss. Buggy is not riding this. He's not quietly enjoying the misunderstanding while pretending to be humble. He is actively, sincerely, in a blind panic, trying to explain to everybody that they've got the wrong end of it. And every attempt makes it worse, because a man denying that he's dangerous is exactly what a dangerous man would do. He cannot get out. There's no statement he could make. He's a prisoner of his own paperwork. And I do think there's something in here that isn't just a joke, which is that the world government spends this entire series curating what people believe, filing things under the wrong names, killing librarians, taking islands off maps. Enormous, sustained expensive effort to control what a fact means. And the sea does it to them for free, by accident, in the other direction. And the result is a clown. They cannot stop it, they cannot fix it, they cannot put out a statement saying, actually the Emperor of the Sea is a coward with a novelty nose, because who'd believe them? And because the last 4 times they told the world something, it turned out to be a cover story. They spent their entire history teaching everyone that the official version is what's true. And now the official version says buggy, and they have to live in it. So that's the lot. Or that's 15 of them anyway, which is not the lot. But it's what I had time for. I think the thing I'd leave you with, if you're still awake, is that none of this happened by accident. Oda decided very early on what his world wasn't going to do, and he's held it for nearly 30 years, which is longer than most people hold anything. No undo button, no free resurrections, no copy that's obviously the fake, no history that stays buried. Every single power in this world, however daft it looks on the surface, has a fence round it, and the fence is where the meaning lives. The rubber isn't interesting. The reason the rubber had to be called rubber is interesting. The time fruit isn't interesting. The direction it refuses to go is interesting. That's the whole trick, really. He builds a thing that can do anything, and then he decides very carefully what it can't. And the can't is the story. There's loads I didn't get to. The Sunny's wood and what it's actually made of. Anel and what his hearing is doing to the idea of privacy in a country he built. Hawkins and his cards, which is a whole other kind of future problem. The 1,000 Sunny soul, if it's got one. Blackbeard and however many fruits he's supposed to be holding, which nobody has explained, and which I suspect nobody's going to for a while yet. They'll probably turn up in another one of these at some point. No promises. I've got a list and it keeps getting longer, which is a nice problem to have. Anyway, thanks for staying up with me.